A twin-engine Cessna can fly faster than 200 miles an hour, but it doesn't leap from 0 to 200. It builds. It rolls down that runway in those tiny, unremarkable increments, a little more speed, then a little more, until, without any single dramatic moment you could point to, there's lift. Writing works exactly the same way. Hey, friend. Welcome back to Your Right Life Coach, the podcast for heart-led authors who are ready for motivation and momentum. I'm Alice Kreider, your Right Life Coach, and I'm so glad you carved out a little time to be here today. I see you out there, word slingers, story starters, brave beginners, relentless finishers. I see you squeezing this episode in between your never-ending to-do list and your day-to-day job, or listening on a walk because that's the only 30 minutes you've carved out for yourself today. I'm glad you're spending some of it here. So I want to talk to you about something that from the outside looks like absolutely nothing is happening. You know the kind of progress I mean, the kind nobody claps for, the kind that never makes it into a highlight reel or a launch day Instagram post. If you've ever scrolled past somebody else's book deal or their finished manuscript or their agent announcement and thought, how did they get here so fast? Well, I need you to hear me on this. They didn't. There was a long, slow, unglamorous stretch before any of that ever lifted off the ground. And today, I want to take you there. Let's do this. When I was a kid, my favorite uncle was a pilot. He flew a twin-engine Cessna, and every single chance I got, I would climb up into that cockpit beside him, buckle in, and wait for my favorite part, watching the ground shrink underneath us until the whole town looked small enough to hold in one hand. I still get that thrill whenever I travel, even now jammed into a middle seat on a crowded commercial flight with somebody else's elbow on my armrest. The second those wheels leave the runway, something in me still goes, there it is. That feeling never gets old. But here's what I noticed as a kid. Every single time, without exception, before that plane ever left the ground, it had to taxi. Slowly, carefully. Almost painfully slow when all you want to do is be airborne. A twin-engine Cessna can fly faster than 200 miles an hour, but it doesn't leap from 0 to 200. It builds. It rolls down that runway in those tiny, unremarkable increments, a little more speed, then a little more, until, without any single dramatic moment you could point to, there's lift. The wheels simply aren't touching the ground anymore. And that's when I realized writing works exactly the same way. A book doesn't start with a massive breakthrough. An article doesn't begin with a bolt of inspiration falling out of the sky. It starts with micro actions. One word, one sentence, one small repeatable thing you do today that you can do again tomorrow. And here's the real deal. Those tiny actions aren't just getting something done. They're building something in your brain. A small win, repeated, starts to rewire how you see yourself as a writer. It creates what I call a runway effect. And before you know it, you're not white-knuckling your way through one sentence at a time anymore. You're cruising. So this week, I don't want you waiting for the massive moment of inspiration. I don't want you to look for the leap. I want you to taxi. Just taxi. And I promise you, friend, most people watching from the gate can't tell the difference between a plane that's about to lift off and one that's rolling slowly down the runway. From where you're sitting mid-taxi, it can feel like nothing at all is happening, but it is, and that's exactly what I want to talk about today. As I've watched the authors I coach and the manuscripts that cross my desk, I've noticed that the writers who actually finish, and who keep going book after book, are almost never the ones who had the most dramatic burst of motivation. They're the ones who figured out how to keep their wheels turning on the runway, day after unremarkable day, until the lift just happened. So let me share what that actually looks like, because I don't believe this is complicated. I think we've just been sold a different story about how progress is supposed to work, one with more fireworks in it than real life ever has. The first thing I notice in writers who build real momentum is that their starting point is almost embarrassingly small. An author who wanted to write a memoir came to me a while back, and every time we talked about her writing goals, she described a huge, ambitious session. She would write 2 chapters in 2 hours and lay the whole vision out in one sitting. And every week she hadn't done it. Not because she lacked the calling, she had plenty of that. She just kept setting a starting line so far away that she needed a surge of motivation just to walk up to it. And motivation, as you and I both know, doesn't show up on schedule. So we shrunk it absurdly down. 1 sentence a day, that's it. And seriously, something shifted almost immediately because 1 sentence doesn't require motivation. It just requires you to open the document. And once you're in the document, well, you can imagine where that goes. Which brings me to the second thing I notice. The writers with momentum have made it easy on themselves. They're not relying on willpower at 9 o'clock at night when they're exhausted. They've set things up the night before so that tomorrow's version of them, the tired one, the busy one, the one who'd rather scroll than write, doesn't have to fight for it. The document is already set up on the laptop. The notebook is already on the kitchen table. They've cleared away every little obstacle between themselves and the page because they've stopped trusting willpower and started trusting a clear path instead. Another author I worked with kept telling me she just wasn't a morning person, as if that settled the matter. Well, what actually changed things for her wasn't becoming a morning person. It was setting up her writing space by leaving her laptop open already on the right page the night before. She didn't get more disciplined. She just made the path of least resistance the same path as her goal. That's not a hack. It's just kindness toward the tired version of yourself who has to show up tomorrow. The third thing, and I think this is the one that gets overlooked the most, is that writers with momentum track their wins, not in some elaborate spreadsheet. They just notice. They let themselves actually feel it when they show up, because something happens in your brain when you check something off, even something small. There's a dopamine hit, a little motivation fuel. That's what actually brings you back tomorrow and the next day. You're not just building pages, you're building a sense of, I'm someone who does this, and that feeling is the whole engine. A former client used to keep a sticky note on her monitor, and every day she wrote, she'd put a small check mark on it. That was her whole system. No app, no spreadsheet, nothing fancy. But by the time she finished her first draft, that sticky note was covered edge to edge, and she told me she almost didn't want to throw it away because it was proof of something she started to doubt about herself. And the fourth thing I want you to hear, writers with momentum don't gain it alone. Every author I've watched build sustainable momentum has somebody who knows what they're working on. A friend, a coach, a community, somebody to tell when they show up, and somebody who notices if they go quiet for a while. I always invite members in my Inkwell Collective to post their writing wins in our community chat every Friday. It only takes them a few minutes to say, here's what I wrote this week. Super easy. And as simple as it is, that consistency does more than any productivity app they could ever download. Because accountability isn't really about pressure. It's about having a witness, somebody who can see your runway when you're too close to it to see it yourself. Now, I imagine some of you are thinking, because I hear it all the time, Alice, 1 sentence a day isn't going to get my book written by the deadline I'm carrying around in my head. And I hear that, I do. But here's what I want to offer you. The math on 1 sentence a day was never the point. The point is that 1 sentence a day, done consistently, turns into a habit. And a habit, once it's actually wired in, is the thing that eventually lets you write more than a sentence without it costing you anything close to what it used to cost. You're not trying to finish the book in one micro action. You're trying to become someone who shows up so that finishing the book becomes inevitable. And I know there's another version of this doubt too, the one that sounds like, but this is my calling. Shouldn't it feel bigger than this? Friend, I believe that question comes from a beautiful place, but your calling doesn't need you to perform its size every single day. It just needs you to keep showing up for it. Some of the most sacred work I've witnessed in my years as an editor has been built one unremarkable weekday at a time. There's a third doubt I hear a lot too, and it sounds something like, I've already lost so much time. I started late. Other people are 10 years ahead of me. What's 1 sentence going to do about that? I understand that ache, but friend, in all my years editing manuscripts, I have never once been able to predict which author would finish and which wouldn't by how early they started. I've watched writers who began in their 60s outpace writers who began in their 20s, simply because the 60-year-old kept writing and the 20-year-old kept waiting for a more dramatic entrance. The runway doesn't care how late you got to the airfield, it only cares whether you're moving down it. Here's the mindset shift underneath all of this, and I really want you to hear it. This only works if you stop measuring yourself by the leap and start measuring yourself by whether you showed up. Most people who give up on a writing project didn't fail because they lacked talent. They failed because they tried to go from 0 to 200 miles an hour in a single sitting. They wrote for 6 hours on Saturday, burned out by Sunday, and quietly let the project die by the following Wednesday. Heroic bursts feel productive in the moment. There's a rush to them, like adrenaline, but they're not what momentum is actually made of. Momentum is made of quiet, reliable, almost boring consistency, the kind you can trust on your worst day, not just on your best day. And here's the part that took me the longest to actually believe for myself. You don't get to skip the bad days. You will have them. The goal isn't to never miss. The goal is to never miss twice. One day off is just a day. 2 in a row starts to become a new identity and not the one you're after. So, if you miss tomorrow, don't try to punish yourself into some massive comeback session the next day. Just take the smallest possible step and let that be enough to keep the runway intact. This isn't just my opinion, friend. Best-selling author John Grisham has talked for years about the discipline of daily writing. As he put it, write at least 1 page every day without fail. And he would know the man's built an entire career out of novels, 1 page, 1 day at a time. Now, I want to say something that might sound like it contradicts everything I just told you, because building momentum isn't only about doing more small, consistent things. Sometimes it's about stopping. I have reminders set on my phone, 5 of them spread throughout the day, and they're not there to remind me to write or edit more. They're there to remind me to pause, to breathe, to notice what's actually around me, to listen to my own heart and to God. Because when I actually stop and let myself be present for even a moment, I come back to the page with more energy, more creativity, more genuine motivation than I had before the pause. The pause isn't a break from momentum. It's part of how momentum gets renewed. I used to push straight through that instinct. I'd run myself to exhaustion in the name of getting more done. And there's actually a name some people use for that pattern. It's called the rushing woman syndrome. And it did not get me there any faster. What it got me was burned out, depleted, running on a kind of fumes I didn't even realize I'd been low on. Even an airplane must come down eventually. It has to land and refuel before it can taxi out for the next flight. That's not a failure of the system. That's the rhythm the whole system depends on. And I think a lot of us have been taught to feel guilty about the landing, when really, landing and refueling are what makes the next takeoff possible at all. I'm not saying I have this all figured out. I want to be honest about that. I'm not handing you a finished formula. I'm just stating that what I keep noticing in my own life and in the lives of writers I work with, the ones who last are the ones who let themselves land. This is what I mean when I talk about alignment creating momentum instead of hustle creating it. The authors I watch go the distance, book after book, season after season. They aren't grinding harder than everyone else around them. They're aligned with a rhythm they can actually sustain. Small actions, real rest, and a runway long enough to build real speed before they ever expect themselves to fly. I've read hundreds of manuscripts at this point in my career, and if there's one pattern I'd put my name behind, it's this one. The books that actually get finished are almost never written by the most talented person in the room. They're written by the person who figured out their own sustainable rhythm. Taxi, lift, cruise, land, refuel, taxi again. And they trusted that rhythm even when it looked unimpressive from the outside. That's not a lesser path, friend. That is the path. So here's your invitation this week, and I want you to notice how small this is on purpose. Pick one micro action, 1 sentence, 1 paragraph, 1 5-minute sit down with your manuscript. That's it. Not the whole chapter, not the breakthrough, just the taxi. If your brain immediately jumps to, but that's not enough, Listen, that's the leap thinking talking, not the truth. Let it be enough. Let it be exactly as small as it needs to be for you to actually do it. And then, here's the part most people skip. Notice when you do it. Let yourself actually feel that small win instead of brushing right past it on your way to the next thing. That's not silly. It's not small talk you're giving yourself. That's the very fuel that gets you back to the runway tomorrow. Really, that's it. If something in this episode found you today, I want to invite you into a place where this is exactly the kind of conversation we're having all the time. Not hustle, not hacks, just real sustainable momentum built together. That's the Inkwell Collective. We run live writing sprints, masterclasses, and workshops together over Zoom. We cheer for each other's small, unglamorous wins, and our community has become one of my favorite places to be. There's something about taxiing alongside other writers instead of alone that changes the whole feel of it. You can find us at alicekreider.com under courses and resources, and I'll drop the exact link in the show notes for you. And if you're in a season where you want more individualized support, somebody in your corner who knows your specific manuscript and your specific stuck places, I do one-on-one coaching as well. You're welcome to reach out anytime at admin@alicekreider.com or find me at alicekreider.com. And of course, if this show has become part of your own runway, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss the next one. And if you have 30 seconds to spare, a quick review helps another heart-led author find their way here too. Here's a review that came in recently. Hey Alice, I'm listening to your podcasts and love them. They're always informative, always upbeat and encouraging, and your challenges are always realistic and doable. Thank you. Remember, you've got a story worth telling and a message to deliver. You don't have to leap today, you just have to taxi. I'm so glad you're here, friend, and I'll catch you next time.